We are the Maryland Department of Health.
State Circle is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Good evening. Welcome to State Circle. Coming up tonight, helping job seekers through some very difficult times. That's ahead. But we begin tonight with the central element of democracy, which is the subject of a new book titled What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. We spoke with the author, University of Baltimore law professor Kim Whaley. Professor, thanks for joining us. Tell us about your interest in voting. When did you decide there was a book to be written here?
After I wrote a book last year on the Constitution and the basics on how government works, I realized that it all really goes to voting. And there's a big issue in civic literacy, I think, in the country. So I'm trying to fill some voids in basic understanding of how the rules of the game work, because without understanding the rules, it's hard to make really informed decisions on how to protect democracy, which I think is a big issue right now.
You know, we think of ourselves as the world's greatest democracy, but if you look around the world at other places, even where they don't have compulsory voting, our turnout numbers could be better.
Yeah, it's only about 50% of eligible voters. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is that we've got this patchwork system across the country where states determine the processes. And then even at the local level, it can change from precinct to precinct, depending on the state. But also, we have this belief that our votes don't matter in America, that somehow there's a study that came out at the beginning of this year, a lot of cynicism, belief, I don't like the candidates, it doesn't really matter. And I think it's that sort of shifting the mindset, hopefully through the book and other ways. So people see it as basic as getting up in the morning and brushing your teeth or paying your taxes or getting your kids vaccinated. It's so central to everything else that you care about in government. And I think Americans are a little complacent that the freedoms that we have in this country are sort of set in stone, and they're not. And the way to make sure that they're retained from administration to administration, political party to political party, generation to generation, is to go out and vote.
Well, the right to vote has evolved. I mean, the founding fathers, it was votes by their peers. It was the elite. And over time, the suffrage has expanded. Women, minorities. Where does that trend go? Where are the frontiers now?
Yeah, so a great point in that we've got an opt-in democracy. We have to decide to participate and then demonstrate that we're eligible. Other democracies, it's opt-out. You're sort of automatically a voter and you have to make the affirmative decision to get out. And I think part of that is, as you indicate, it started out wealthy male landowners, and then the tent was enlarged bigger and bigger to include formerly enslaved males and women, et cetera. But I think there's still an undercurrent in this country that only the right people with the right should be able to vote. So we're still seeing, I think, a debate as to the appropriate people voting that is in part sort of part and parcel of how the vote came about to actually be expanded. So the frontier right now is, I think, in this debate between illegal or voter fraud on the one hand and voter suppression on the other hand. And I think on both ends of the spectrum, it's exaggerated, but in particular on the voter fraud side, there just isn't the science and the empirical evidence, notwithstanding even President Trump commissioning a panel to find it. It's just not there. And so I would like to see more focus on how to enlarge access so it's not difficult. But that is the debate, and it tends to fall historically disproportionately on African-American communities, which makes sense given, of course, that was the enslaved population for many generations in this country.
All right, well, let's dig into that, voter fraud and voter suppression. On the fraud side first, any evidence of a significant election ever being stolen? I mean, we think about 1960 and LBJ in Texas, but I don't know that was ever proven.
Right. I mean, a couple of years ago, 2018 in North Carolina, there was some kind of ballot harvesting scandal. It was actually on the Republican side of things. But that's really hard to pull off because, states and poll workers and election administrators have various mechanisms in place to ensure that only registered voters, legally registered voters actually vote. And this is across all different kinds of voting platforms. So it would take a tremendous sort of coordination, almost a conspiracy, to get enough people to somehow pretend to be someone else that's already registered. The other person doesn't show up, so there's not double voting. And then we all kind of coordinate, or those people coordinate to sway an election. It's just really hard to pull off. It's also against federal law and could land you in jail for 5 years. So there just isn't really an incentive to do it. That being said, there are problems with administration because there's just not enough funding. So there's mistakes, there are mistakes that are made. And some people see that as voter fraud, but the answer to that is not to make it harder for people to vote. It's to fund the state's electoral systems better so that it runs more smoothly for every voter.
On the subject of voter suppression, sometimes you see it attempted, it's really clumsy. Sometimes it's fairly sophisticated. How big an issue?
Well, I mean, there's a debate on that as well. Some things that are framed as voter suppression are, again, just problems with administration, lack of financing. So, for example, closing polling places. On the one hand, we have a COVID pandemic. It's difficult to get poll workers that were willing to come. So we saw in Kentucky, for example, lots of polling places closed. That being said, so that could just be by virtue of the logistics of elections. On the other hand, the reason for the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s was sort of politicians who are in charge of electoral systems making changes to essentially disenfranchise populations of primarily African Americans. So literacy tests, poll taxes, things like that. In 2013, the Supreme Court issued a decision that basically gutted the key provision of that statute that now makes it possible for elected officials that are sort of loyal to one party to change voting rules that essentially make it harder for certain populations to vote. You close the polling place in the primarily African-American environment and leave them open in the primarily white neighborhoods, for example. That's just gonna make it harder for one population to get to the polls and make it easier for another population to get to the polls. That's known as voter suppression. It's insidious, it's still a problem. And again, I think it boils down to this underlying debate as to whether we really should open the tent to all eligible voters, which I think shouldn't be a debate anymore, but it does exist.
Your thoughts on voting by mail? We did it in Maryland out of necessity. What was your personal experience with that? And does it expand the franchise? Does it open up the door for fraud? Is it something that people are going to like doing it that way enough that it's just going to become the regular thing?
You know, I do think it'll go to becoming more the regular thing. There are already 5 states that do it almost exclusively and do it well. From my experience, I did get my ballot in the mail. I have colleagues that did not. So I think because the Postal Service, the revenues are down with COVID. We have a lot of postal workers that aren't being able to go to work, et cetera. The mail is going to be slow. So I do think people have to expect they might have to show up at the polls. So get your ballot, request your absentee ballot now, your mail-in ballot. If it doesn't come, get your hand sanitizer and your masks and plan to show up the polls. But I thought it was a fine experience for me. In the states that do it exclusively, people really like it, and it actually increases participation on both sides of the political spectrum. Democrats and Republicans tend to participate in their democracy more if they can do it from home, and I think that's just a good thing across the spectrum of politics and ideology.
Kim Whaley, professor of law at the University of Baltimore. The book is What You Need to Know About Voting and Why. Kim, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
And State Circle continues right after this.
Can you tell us what you know?
Turning back now to the race for the White House.
The State Board of Elections voted Thursday to set up a new election.
It must be a very emotional day.
The world changed in the blink of an eye.
Children are at the heart of this story.
Drop your phone and just be in the moment.
You guys ready?
Yeah!
You bring an energy It's a thrill to see images of a new world for the first time.
I want to look back and say, I learned something. That is where transformation happens.
I see people cry on this show, and I'm like, what y'all doing, man?
Out of the water came this giant thing.
That's incredible.
I feel it in my bones.
This is so totally amazing.
I feel it in my bones. And I know it could still.
They hear that song and they're like, that's my story.
I feel it in my bones.
I have chills.
I feel it in my bones.
All of the joys, all of the sorrows.
This is where it comes from. The rest is history.
I feel it in my bones.
For the tens of millions of people who've been thrown out of work this year, there couldn't be a more challenging environment to find a job. However, there is help. Joining us now are Janet Glover Kirkfleet of the Baltimore Job Hunters Support Group and Angela Heath of TKC Incorporated. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Janet, first, just tell me what your organization does.
So the Baltimore Job Hunters Support Group is a volunteer-led grassroots organization whose mission is to assist all job seekers with emphasis on older, long-term unemployed workers by providing social, emotional, and psychological support, along with information, referral, and customized job search strategies to help the unemployed maintain energy, resilience, and self-confidence as they strive to find successful careers. We provide all of our services free of charge. In addition to weekly meetings, we hold several special events during the year.
And Angela, your organization?
Yes, TKC Incorporated is a training organization, and we specialize in helping people 45 and older determine other things they can do with their skill set to supplement their income. So whether it's starting a gig, meaning a contract, or actually starting a business. And we also help corporations figure out what to do with this new world of work called the gig economy.
Well, let's focus on the gig economy. In an environment like this with double-digit unemployment, is it easier to find a gig than a job?
You know, Jeff, I'm not sure if it's easier, but there actually is an easier process, I think. Many corporations are looking at moving away from the full-time employment offers right now because everything is so uncertain. So they want to hire contract workers for a particular program that they're pushing out or for a given period of time. So the process of finding gigs is an easier process.
You know, just a few months ago when the world was in much better shape, it might have been a challenge for somebody who was out of work to explain why they were out of work, what happened to your last job, that sort of thing. Maybe one little silver lining here when so many people are looking for work is you really don't have to explain that, do you?
That is certainly true right now. And one of the things that we have learned from the Great Recession is that when there was widespread unemployment, when unemployment was in double digits then, there was a lot more sympathy for people who were looking for work. As we got post the Great Recession period, there were still long-term unemployed people. And you're absolutely right. There's this idea that unemployment is low. Why don't you have a job? You must be doing something wrong. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. The 3.5% unemployment that we had pre-COVID was not really a true estimate or a true measure of the level of unemployment that we had in this country. We still had marginally employed people. We still had involuntary part-time workers. We had discouraged workers, people who stopped looking for work because they didn't believe that there were any positions for them. So during this period in the post or COVID pandemic economy, there is going to be there is a lot more sympathy for people who are unemployed. And all you have to say is COVID-19 and people are, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, of course, nobody wants sympathy. They're looking for a job. And you have experience, Janet, in counseling.
Yes.
Talk a little about the emotional impact of being someplace that you never thought you were going to be.
And that is certainly the case for many people who are unemployed due to the pandemic. As you well know, there were tens of thousands of people applying for unemployment insurance for the first time ever in their careers. Losing your job is devastating. It's a loss of, in addition to loss of income, it is a loss of identity. It's a loss of, it can feel like a loss of colleagues. It puts your whole lifestyle under threat. When you have children, you have to explain why we can't do certain things, why we have to cut back. And it could be very emotionally devastating. We see symptoms of depression, anxiety, suicidality. All of that increases when someone is unemployed. And of course, the longer you're unemployed, the worse that can get.
All right, so we're going to give people advice to hit the ground running here. Where do you start? Looking for a job, looking for a gig? What's your best advice?
Well, my best advice is to really tap into the online gig marketplace, which is a secret for most Americans. There are these websites, there are hundreds of them, literally, maybe 200 to 300 that I've identified, where buyers are looking for someone to do work for them right now. They can be large corporations, they can be small consultants. They're looking for people to do specific work right now, and they have the funding to pay. So analyzing what's available in terms of your skill set in this online gig marketplace is the first place I tell people to start. In terms of building a business, that's a little longer journey. So the online marketplace is where you can start to earn some income while you continue to look for a job or while you build a business.
Janet, your thoughts on there? Where does somebody start?
So we recommend four different recommendations for people who are looking for a job in an economy where there's double-digit unemployment. I absolutely concur with my colleague, Angela. I say, first of all, find some support in what can become a protracted job search. Family, friends, neighbors, clergy, counselors, colleagues, you need support during this process because it is hard. Because finding a job and getting a job is much harder than working a job. We recommend that people make plans, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly plans, simulating to some extent the routine of having a job that you would go to every day. We also encourage people not to get too comfortable receiving unemployment insurance because it does end. And research demonstrates that the longer you are unemployed after your unemployment insurance benefits end, the less likely you are to become reemployed. So do not wait. Plan, set goals, take a hard look at your finances, take some austerity measures, identify your needs versus wants because you might be in this for the long haul.
Let me ask about, if I jump in for a second, about the role of networking, which in a digital age, it may not be what people are remembering from the last time, and not everybody out there is a great backslapper or has a big network of friends, but maybe there's a church, maybe there's some other affiliation that they can leverage. How important is that, and what's your advice for getting the most out of it?
It is extremely important, very, very important. You never know where that next job opportunity is going to come from. I could relate dozens of stories of very strange adventures that have led to people getting jobs. Social media is very important. LinkedIn, of course, we talk about that all the time with job searching, but don't ignore Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram, where you can not only find job leads, but also connect to people who might be that conduit to your next position. We also encourage people, as does Angela, to explore all options. Traditional W-2 jobs, full-time with benefits, were not as plentiful as we like to believe in the pre-COVID economy, and there's still lots of competition for them. So consider freelancing, contracting, setting up a consultancy, operating a small business, leveraging those skills that you learned throughout your career. turning a hobby or an interest into another income stream. But I would say that probably the most important thing is don't do this alone. Use the resources that the state of Maryland provides through the American Job Centers, the Career One Stops. The Baltimore Job Hunter Support Group is available along with other local job clubs. We've been in continuous operation since November 2011. We formed in the post-Great Recession period, and we are still here to help people.
Before we go, I'll start with Angela. Where can people get more information on your organization and any upcoming events?
They can go to my website at www.tkcincorporated.com. That's www.tkcincorporated.com. And I do a lot of training. We give away a lot of free counseling as well as programs. So they're welcome to join us there.
And Janet?
We also have a website. We're at bjhsg.org. We can also be reached by phone at 410-627-2372. We provide counseling, coaching, information, referral, volunteer opportunities, advocacy opportunities. We just launched our virtual, 100% virtual outplacement program called TeamWorks. And that is an intensive 12-week program that we plan to run 2 to 4 times per year. And again, that is free of charge for participants.
Very good. Janet and Angela, thanks so much for your time and all the great ideas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to meet you.
Now, an economic bright spot. It appears the Black Lives Matter movement may be leading to a surge in revenue for many Black-owned businesses. Nancy Amato reports.
I didn't put a pandemic in my business plan.
Natasha Valencia opened up her bakery and cafe for the Love of Sweets in Frederick in January. At that time, her biggest challenge was getting the word out about her new business and her signature milkshakes with a cupcake on top. Then came the pandemic and a 1-month shutdown. When she reopened, she wasn't sure what to expect.
I have a really strong drive to push through anything, so, I kind of don't really get faltered by a lot, but, the community support has just been amazing.
James Smith, the owner of Jerk and Jive Caribbean Kitchen, is feeling the love, too.
We weren't sure about things were going to work out, but in the past month, we've really seen the Frederick community come back and support us, and it's been good.
They credit that support to several Facebook groups highlighting small businesses and the Black Lives Matter movement. It appears more people are showing their support with their dollars.
Sometimes a customer will come in and order, a $50 meal and tip $20 or something, way above the traditional 20%, which we feel is a good tip. They've gone 30-40%, with some of the tips, so it's been really good.
And while the pandemic has been hard on all small businesses, the reality is 41% of Black-owned businesses have had to shut their doors. Economists predict many will not be able to reopen.
Unfortunately, for a lot of Black businesses, we just don't have the access to capital that other businesses have. In America, the white-Black economic disparity is there.
It's very, very difficult to get loans or applications even once you're in. I don't think people know, if you're not in existence for 2 years, you don't get help. So it's a tough pill to swallow when you're trying to open something and you have to finagle different ways of going about it. And I think that needs to be talked about more because there's so many people that have wonderful ideas that should be in business.
But these business owners say the support they're receiving, along with the images of people across racial and ethnic groups banding together to demand change, gives them hope.
I was alive when Rodney King was beat in '92. I was a high school senior, and I remember the outrage, but it's not anything compared to what's happening right now.
I hope that things are really going to change. I mean, it's been going on for hundreds of years.
It's white America along with Black America, so when you have both of us working together, it's big, really big and really strong.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
The manufacturing of medical protective gear nearly non-existent in the United States prior to the pandemic, but now a Maryland company is stepping in to fill the void, as our Charles Robinson tells us.
So we are manufacturing personal protective equipment for medical workers, frontline workers, and government entities right now. So primarily we're manufacturing face shields. We've made about 24,000 of them so far.
William Holman is the executive director of Baltimore Open Works. They've been closed during the pandemic. On a whim, someone suggested they use open sourcing to create face shields. With multiple laser printers and cutters, they went to work. There is little PPE, especially face shields, being manufactured in America. Open Works began supplying their product to local medical workers. Got the attention of the federal government.
As you can see, this is one of the shields they make here. As you can tell, it's a little bit longer because that's what's required for the USDA.
The USDA reached out to us to protect their inspector workforce. They have about 7,500 inspectors at meatpacking and food processing plants all over the country, protecting the nation's food supply.
To meet the demand, they have reached out to others who have laser printers and cutters. Process allows for no physical contact during the transfer. Product is literally flying out the door, and they're happy to do it. In Baltimore, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
Charles, thank you. That is State Circle for this week. Remember, you can find our videos online at video.mpt.tv. Please follow us on Twitter at MPT News, and you can find us on Facebook under MPT News as well. Now for Charles and Nancy and all of us at MPT, I'm Jeff Salkin. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.
This July 4th, join us for a special 40th anniversary presentation of A Capital Fourth with your hosts John Stamos and Vanessa Williams, and performances from coast to coast featuring Patti LaBelle, John Fogerty, The Temptations, Andy Grammer, Yolanda Adams, Renee Fleming, Trace Atkins, Brian Stokes-Mitchell, Chrissy Metz, Mandy Gonzalez, and a tribute to our frontline workers. It's the 40th anniversary of A Capital Fourth.
Saturday night at 8 on MPT.
You're watching MPT. Be informed. Be entertained. Be inspired.
On Masterpiece Mystery.
I got a story.